Hi guys, welcome. I'm Carly from Carly's Creative Clay. It's lovely to see I've already got people in the chat. I hope you've all been having a good week. My week has been crazy busy and I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. So I'll rush through my items of the week because you're actually going to see these throughout the stream because these are what I'm using as my guide. I mean, usually I say go on to Google Images and get pictures of the thing you're trying to make, but if you made it before, you can use those as your guides. So, very quickly, train plaque, swirly back, £10. I can do custom plaques. If you go onto my Etsy shop, you can have any name and any basic item. This one's an £8. It's got little dangly beads and a hanger, and is a gold train. So I'll stick that to one side. Right. Quick showsies of how stuff ended from the other week. This is the giraffes varnished up. I wanted to show you this particularly because the base, when it was unvarnished, was not that colourful. So it did come out a lot better. And thank you, Fairy Hedgehog. And this is the finished snowman, baked and varnished. And I think he's turned out brilliant. So they will end up in my shop as soon as I actually get some time. So what's taking up all my time? I've got some awesome news to tell you all. I've actually arranged with a place called Your Space Sutton. They've got a Facebook group. It's spelled exactly as you think. So I've arranged with them to hold my first ever clay lesson with students that will be paying, and there's 15 places, and what you'll be making is a penguin like this to hang on your Christmas tree. And if you buy one ticket, it's £12. If you're buying two or more, you can get them for £10 a ticket, and it'll be an hour-long session of me teaching you how to make this very cute penguin.
Fairy Hedgehog says the snowman looks splendid. Artilai says love them all, and then yay.
Thank you, all of you. And talking of snowmen, I've also made a take-home kit that you can buy to make this snowman yourself, and I'll be starting to sell that. The first place you can buy that will be at the clay lessons. Then I've got a Christmas fair at Your Space that I'm going to sell them. I don't know if I'm going to put any in my Etsy shop. I might if I get time, but I've got to organise everything for these clay lessons because it's on the 7th of next month. So you haven't got long if you're looking to book for then. I've got a lot to do by the 7th. Right. So, making a train. Now, in order for this not to be the longest tutorial ever, I've made the track already. Literally rolled out some swirly green. You can just use plain green if you don't want to make it swirly. If you want to make the swirly clay, it's in a lot of my beginning videos. Then I rolled out long log of brown and cut it into the same size pieces and pushed them flat with a rolling pin. Stack them across, and as you can see, it's the same thing. Thin silver log rolled flat for the tracks across the front. So we've got to get going on making the main train bit. So that's the big square that I use for the main body. because that would be a very thick chunky bit of clay, it will be highly likely that I won't get the baking temperature all the way to the center of that clay. So I do use a foil armature. You've seen me use round balls in all sorts of things. This time I made a foil cube, and all I did was roll a ball that was bigger than the cube that I wanted, and used my glass counter to literally just start rubbing sides like that. Once I got it into the cube shape that I wanted, I then covered it in masking tape. So underneath all this tape is just tin foil, but I didn't think you'd want to listen to me peeling masking tape. It's pretty noisy, so I've covered it. So that's going to be the center. I want to make my train gold and red, so I've rolled out and conditioned some gold clay. Got red on it already. That's a good start when you stick your clay together. It's better to take it off now, and I'll use that in some rose gold I make up later, because I use rose gold in so many different things, so that's not wasted clay. Right, conditioning clay. You roll it out into a stick, scrunch it back into a ball. Do that a few times. What you're doing is mixed in the chemical in it called a plasticizer, which is keeping the plastic soft. So
Life says, I love rose gold.
Rose gold is really, really pretty, and how I make it, I either mix red Fimo or copper Fimo and gold Fimo. So red Fimo and gold Fimo as one mix, or I use copper Fimo and gold Fimo. But either way gives you a slightly different end result. It's worth having a play around with, and swirling it in with gold clay looks really good, especially if you make an antique gold, which is gold and black. So yeah, it's really sort of nice swirly pattern that can be made from that. So I've taken off some clay that I've conditioned, so you mixed in the plasticizer so it's not in patches. I'm just starting to flatten it out. You can use a rolling pin, but I just figured I would pinch it this bit. Either way is fine. You're going to try and cover the cube. It doesn't matter if your clay ends up being too small and you have to patch in more clay, because we'll be able to smooth out all the join lines anyway, as you'll see, because you'll get join lines as we fold this up round it. I wouldn't go too thin. Probably 1/2 centimetre is the thinnest I like to work with my clay. When you start working with clay thinner than that, it can stick to itself too easily and tear easily. It's just a real pain. So I'm wrapping the cube, but I'm making sure I'm not trapping air, so I'm pushing from the stuck bit to the outside always, rather than from the outside inwards, because you can trap air bubbles like that. Now, as you see, I didn't measure out the space, and that's because you're able to bend the clay into whatever shape to get it to fit a lot easier than if you're trying to, say, wrap a parcel with paper. The paper really doesn't fold and bend into shape as easily as the clay does, and that's because the kind of plastic it's in the PVC family, which is quite a rubbery plastic. So I'm just taking off the excess. Again, don't need to be neat with it, but you don't want to waste clay by having a really thick bit. There we go, that'll do. Right, all these join lines. What we're going to do, there's two options. Let's move this up a bit out of the way. You can either use your glass counter and just start to push it into shape. And once it gets into shape, you can use your thumb to just smooth over all those join lines like that. Or you can use your rolling pin, which will do both jobs. You've got to make sure when you use rolling pins that you're not just pushing all the clay into a nice big point on the corners and the middle is really thin. So I tend to use my fingers because you can feel when the clay's getting very thin. You can also feel when you have air bubbles trapped, and if that's the case, just get a pin, stab it, and then push the air towards the hole, trying not to smudge the hole closed again before the air's out. And that's easier said than done with clay because it wants to seal over, especially when it's raw. Well, only when it's raw. When it's baked, it's solid plastic. Right, so we got it covered. I'm now just getting these edges a little sharper by pinching on them. Like this. And because you're making something that's been made like a machine, they will have very straight lines, whereas with nature, so animals and trees, you can get away with being a bit more wavy on the corners, but for the body of a train it notices. So it's worth taking the time. And can you see I'm just using two fingers and pinching along like this down the bottom, and try and get these corners in. There we go. That's better. It seems that, especially with very soft clay, they want to round out edges. You have to come and pay attention to make sure that you've got an actual decent point on it all. But there we go. Right, I'd say you're basically done, except that one is not flat. There we are. Right, all flat sides. So that's the main part. Now we're going to do along the body, and that's a lot more easy because you're dealing in discs. So you want just enough for a disc that will go halfway up, because you need to get that front window in. It's hard to see on it. There you go, front window. So you don't want a massive. That'll probably do it. Don't want it massive. So roll it out into a ball. If you're using gold, can you see the tarnishy looking patches? That's because in the clay they use mica powder, which is flat discs. So when they stand up on their side, it goes to a darker colour than when they're flat and reflecting light. If you want rid of that, you just rub the surface with your thumb. Can you see? And it goes to the brighter gold. If you can't be bothered doing that, you can always cover it in a coating of mica powder, because mica powder sticks very well to polymer clay. Right, I'm turning it into a disc. I want flat sides like this, so I'm just using my thumb and fingers, the top and bottom ones, to keep it at the thickness that I want, and the ones around the sides are very gently pushing on. I'm not using a lot of force. There you go. So that can go in line with the bottom. So put the cube on your table, then you can drop your disc down and push it on like that. So your cube now has a little pig snout, and that's what you want. The next disc along is going to be half the thickness, because we're going to do a little flat red disc in between.
Life asks, so that bit is solid clay?
Yeah, when you can go through a few centimetres okay, but when you start getting thicker than that, you'll still get it to temperature, but you've got to bake it for about an hour. And then that comes with risks of cracking. I think that ball's a bit too big. That's probably right. Yeah. Let's get to that sort of size. So when you use foil in the middle, it just alleviates that worry. Just rolling out 2 balls. But a lot of my early stuff, where I didn't know about this, where I had very thick things and I probably didn't bake them for long enough, that I still don't have any that do the major structural breakage. I sometimes have little thin sticky outy bits break off, but I have that on things with armatures and stuff like that. You just make friends with 2-part epoxy and try and make sure that you put better wires in next time. Right, so I've got 2 balls, and I'm going to need the red thin line dividing it, and I've found that needs to be about half the size of the balls that you make to go either side. You can also make one thick chunky disc and then just wrap red around it, or whatever your accent colour is, but I like to put an extra disc in. I find it easier. So you want that the same size as the first one you made, and you can turn it so that the first disc is facing upwards so that you can size measure the ones you're making. But they need to all form a very sort of uniform cylinder. That looks about right. Yeah. So that one goes on top of the next gold, because when you look at a train they have panels sectioned out in the long front bit. I did actually research this the first time I made one. So the little red disc, you're taking it down a lot thinner than the gold ones, because you've still got to get it to sit in line like that. Perfect, that went fine. Now, before I start on the next bit of gold, where did I put my tissue? Let's get a new bit of tissue. Gotta clean your hands, because can you see there's now red on the tissue that would have been on my next gold disc, which you can clean off with rubbing alcohol. It's not the worst thing in the world, but it's annoying and it slows you down. So let's get this one a little bit wider. There we go. See, there we are. And I'm then gonna accent the front with a red disc and a tiny little gold dot. There was a model of steam train that used to do that with the front of theirs, and it does look quite nice, so it tends to be what I try and do. One of these days I am going to go for a different model of train, probably something modern, but I have to say I love the old steam trains. They're so pretty, and the modern ones, I can see the stylization reasons they've chose, but I wouldn't say they're as pretty as the old steam trains. Would you? No? I mean, they were terrible for the environment and not a particularly fast or good train, and apparently it was a real bumpy ride. Some of the modern steam trains that they've got now that you can go on experience days with. Sorry, what?
Hearty Life says, oh yeah, old steam trains are gorgeous.
They are really, really beautiful. I've got a thing for them. I've never been on one and I really want to. But they were meant to be very bumpy, and some of the new modern day ones that you can go on nowadays, they've got modern shock absorbers that back in the day that they were used properly, obviously they didn't have that, so it was a bit of a teeth rattler. So that's what I got.
Hearty Life said, I went on one down near Tunbridge Wells.
Oh, cool. Was it one that gave you tea and cakes in the experience?
That sounds nice.
I know, doesn't it? There are various steam trains where you can go on. They have open sides and you can go and have tea. And it's just...
Hearty Life said, can't remember the name of the place.
Fair enough. There are several that do it, and it's usually somewhere very scenic. Although, I think if you made the inside very period and put a bit of something entertainment-wise on, some dude with a piano or something, you could probably take them through somewhere that's not pretty and people wouldn't notice.
Hearty Life said, we didn't have tea, but I don't know if it was available.
Fair enough. Still a good thing because it's a life experience. I remember when...
Place, that's it.
Sorry. I remember when my dad took my cousin, when she was a very small girl, on a day trip out to do every form of public transport. So underground, overground, Docklands Light Railway, the ferry thing they do, buses. What was that it? I think that was it. Yeah, if I'm missing any, but he planned this route where you got to experience all of them, and you ended up at the Sea Life Centre in London. Awesome day out for a small kid.
Hearty Life said, we combined it with a visit to the Enchanted Forest at Groombridge.
That does sound fun. Anything that claims to have an enchanted forest sounds like my sort of place.
Hearty Life said, that sounds like fun too.
Well, she was just getting to that age where she was going to start going out by herself, and most of the time her parents drove her around in a car, so she did do the local bus, but a lot of them she'd never been on. And with Docklands Light Railway, because there's no driver, there is a front seat and you get to look out, and it's pretty much the view that a train driver would have if there actually was one. And if you go on a day that's not too busy, I mean, I can imagine that seat gets hotly contested on school holidays and that sort of thing. But if you're lucky, it's a really good one to sit on. It feels weird being where the driver should be, because you think, I don't know how to drive a train. You don't need to, it's all automated. But yeah, it still freaks you out a bit. Sorry. Right, what I'm doing is I've made up some light blue and silver swirly clay that I'm going to use for the windows. So, I know I'm going to need to cut them down to size. I'm just making up some little rectangles to put where the windows are going to be.
Artie Life's asked, have you ever been on a funicular railway? I can't remember what the funicular...
I have no idea what a funicular railway is. It sounds interesting. To Google, Jamie.
Oh, they're the ones that climb...
Oh, are they the one that climb up? Yes, I did one of those. I think there was one in Cornwall. Up the side of a cliff, or not Perrin Sands. I can't remember the name of it. Somewhere coastal.
Artie Life said it's a short, very steep one that uses a counterweight.
Yeah, that's the ones.
Necessarily always use counterweight, I think.
But
it might do.
Yes, I've been on one as a small child, and I remember being both fascinated and a bit freaked out. I'm not freaked out when I go on things like ladders and scaffoldings, because I actually trust them more.
Fairy Hedgehog says Hastings.
Hastings, that was it. I used to go there as a little kid.
Artie Life says, or rather the carriages counterweight each other.
Right, still a bit big, so I'm trying to get it so that the window fits in that space and there's room for a border. But yes, that would be what I'm remembering. I used to go to Hastings as a little child with my parents. Right, what we got? That looks like this will fit in nicely there. Sorry, I'm looming over the camera there. But little blue window. And what I'm going to do...
It's a frosty window.
Yeah. It's very hard to simulate glass with polymer clay. So you have to go a bit cartoon with it. I'm just giving it a nice little red border. It looks like there's a window frame. So now the driver can actually see out the train, which is useful, I've always found. One of my friends was training to be a train driver, and it's not an easy job.
Artie Life says it's cute.
Thank you.
I think it is cute.
There we go. Yeah, the hardest bit with train driving is making sure that you stop directly at the right point on the platform so that the passengers can get on. And that's not as easy as it sounds. I don't know if they've automated that yet, but if they haven't, they should do. Because when my mate was training, you had to do it by eye. There's a signal, and at that signal you've got to start braking, which after like the first 50 times you must completely overshoot, and everyone's got to run up to the last two carriages to get off the train. But I've never experienced that actually happening. Even though I grew up and lived in London, they all seem to work perfectly and stop at exactly the right point, which I think is a minor miracle. It's also a minor miracle that there haven't been more accidents during rush hour in London. The platforms can get very, very crowded. I understand why on the Jubilee line they put glass doors between the platform and the train tracks, because It's not so much on times when it's not rush hour, but rush hour it's really can get kind of scary.
Artie Lad says a heavy train must be much less reactive to braking than you do. But
Yeah.
used to cars.
A train has a long braking anyway. If a driver sees something on the track, there's usually not a lot they can do about it other than pull a silly face. It's why there's all the signal stuff and why people are truly stupid when they jump red crossings. Have I put that on the wrong side? That's because I'm talking. It needed to go on the back. At least it's the right size for it. There we go. Don't put your window on the roof.
Artie says there are calls for more barriers like that. I think it was there was an accident within the last week on the underground.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. I'm glad I no longer live in London because it was crazy. Back when I was well enough to work, I used to have to go through the Angel Islington and Highbury Corner. Really busy stations.
Artie Life says Skylight.
I know. It's can do, but I was planning on giving it a red roof. But it's easier to put the roof on last once you've done the windows. So I'm just going round and sticking a frame onto the edge like this, and this is a lot easier when your windows are not flush to the wall. So we could have added them on slightly thinner than this, but it would have made adding these frames really difficult. And I think it looks fine the way it is with slightly sticking out windows, personally. But the good thing about it, when you make your own, you can really do what you want with it. I thought I was going to end with just the right amount then. I thought that never happens. There's either too little or too much. There we go. Make sure your window frames are pushed on firmly so they don't roll anywhere. Like this. Because it's far easier to stick down onto raw clay than notice it's not attached properly after you bake it and have to start gluing. Or adding raw clay to it. It's just measure once and all that sort of thing. Right. So we need doors on the front. Sorry, doors on the side rather. And a spout on the front is what I was going to say, and a roof. And then we're on to tyres and what looks to me like a cattle bar. They have these scoops at the front, and I think it's to clear off snow and debris to make sure they don't go under the wheels. But a lot of the old trains had them.
Sure it's so that you can push cattle out the way if they sit on the tracks.
Is it really to push cattle out the way?
I think it's supposed to be.
I was hoping it wasn't to push an actual animal. It was to clear sort of snow or that sort of thing. But I suspect from the shape.
You need a scoop.
Yeah. Who knows? Right, we're going to make some little rectangles for doors to stick on the front. Why do I keep saying front? It's because I've got it in my mind for spout. Stick on the sides. There we go. Right. Use your board to push the sides down. It's the easiest way to end up with straight sides. Like that. Right. Now, although we're putting this on its side, remember that we've got a raised window on that side and we don't want to smudge it. So be careful with your door placement and support it by holding the top and bottom. Right.
Apparently in snowy areas they often do make them also be a snowplow.
Apparently in snowy areas they are a snow plough as well.
But they're not just for cattle, although that has become their nickname. They're mainly for everything. Anything that could derail the train, they want to push it off the track.
Apparently it's not for cattle exclusively, although that's what its reputation's for. It is to push anything that's in front of the train out the way of the wheels so it doesn't derail the train. So they just went with a shape that was a catch-all, literally.
Yeah.
Which makes sense to put something like that. You mean you're going to have a front anyway. You don't need a number plate. So you might as well put something that's going to be safety involved. Just makes sense. Right, we got doors. Now, with that tiny bit of red that I got left over, I'm going to take two really, really small bits like that, because we're going to use them as door handles. Make sure the edges aren't too scruffy. If they are, you're just going to have to roll out a new little tiny bit, but it shouldn't take long just to do that. So there we go, we've got door handles now and windows. So trotting along at a fair pace. Now, top of the train. I'm going to do a large bit of white, large bit of red. I'm foggy today, so I'm sorry if I say lots of wrong words. That is typical of what happens when you're having a bad day with chronic fatigue syndrome, which is something I have. Right, I am going to push this out so that it's pretty thin. Again, don't go thinner than you're comfortable working with, but you want to try and get this as thin as you can for the roof, because it looks a bit weird with quite a thick line. So let's have a look. I'm going to make it slightly bigger than the train roof at the moment, and then cut it so then I get crisp corners, if that makes sense. So that should cut down nicely. So I'm going to do top and sides. Well, one top, one side. Then measure it. And what you can do if you're not sure, you don't want to cut it and then place it on and find out that you've got it wrong, you can line up the two sides that you cut like this, flip it over, then get your blade in under that window and make sure you don't catch the window frame, and cut like that. Sorry, you're going in on a diagonal line, so I was going down at that sort of angle. It's hard to show on camera, but you're turning it upside down and diagonally going in. Not a massive diagonal, just enough so you can get around that window without smudging it. So there you go. We're now got a nice little red roof on it. There. Right. Let's get that red out of the way. So what we got left? We've got a spout to do. Yeah? Right. So gold main body, and we're going to turn that into a very thin cylinder like this. And flatten the ends. Now it's important to make sure that it's the same thickness all the way through, because it looks weird if it's not a very straight cylinder, but that'll do perfectly. I'm going to stick that up at the front there. Now support the bottom part and push it down so it's firmly on, but you're not distorting anything. So lastly, we're going to do that spout cup like that. Maybe a little less than that on the red. Probably that'll do. Right. Into a ball. Now, for this, I need a ball tool. So, let's see, find one that's the right size. It's problem with trying to set up beforehand is because I don't know what size the spout's going to be until I come and have a look. That'll do. Right. So, got a ball tool. These are used for nail varnish and cake decorating. You'll find them under both sections online, and they do come up pretty big. I mean, you can get massive balls for this. Here. Like big ones. But I find I use the little set far more than I use the big set. And I'm just using it to form a cup. Now, let's see, can I get this side out a bit? Let's get my bigger tool. Want the bigger one. You can see the biggest one out of the small set, I've used so much I've actually broke the handle and had to coat it in clay. So what I'm doing is I'm using my thumb as the side for it to push against, and I'm just working that clay out so that it's an even thickness around the side and turns into a little cup like that. Bring it back to a nice round. Then we're going to get this, put it on the top there, and use that ball tool to push down onto the stick like that. There we are. Got the spout. Make sure that column isn't bent. There we go. So it's looking very much like a train. So we got the front bar to do. Let's get this blue out the way because I'm worried I'm going to just end up coating it in red. There we go. Smudge it up, move it out the way. Right. I think we're going to need to get wheels on this before we do the little front catch grill. Getting dry mouth again already. Now, what I think I'm going to do is use some 5p pieces and some pennies. You can make your wheels and pre-bake them, but I think this will work just fine. So, some black. And what I want to do is I want some bigger wheels like that and a smaller wheel up the front. There. Okay. So, we're going to coat our pennies in black. Same way as we did the cube. Smudge it out thin. And then we're going to cover the whole thing. The reason why I'm using the pennies as well is because I want them to actually be able to hold the train up while the clay's baking. When the polymer clay gets baked in the oven, before it goes hard, it goes slightly softer. So if you're load bearing on raw clay, you're definitely got the risk that it's going to buckle in the oven. The other option you can do is you can pre-bake the discs. You can put some grease-proof paper underneath so that it is supported, and then pull the paper out afterwards. But I think that might actually smooch the train track up a bit. And again, you could pre-bake the train track before putting a train on it, is another option. But I thought I'd show that you can use lots of different things as armatures and they all work great. So can you see this? Penny has got nice coating. Sorry, I was off screen. Just covered in black clay, making sure that I've got the shape that I want, and it's all equal thickness. There we go. The good thing about it is because the mint uses a punch, they're uniform size and definitely round. So, like that. Couple more of them to do. So, my plan was, once I've done the main train, I might do a sidecar off camera or next week, one or the other, and then fill it up with some tumble stones I've got. I'm not sure whether the clay will hold the tumble stones very well, so when it's baked, I'll then put the stones in with probably either 2-part epoxy holding them in, or I will nick Jamie's glue gun, because both work, but a glue gun doesn't have as strong a bond as what 2-part epoxy does. So it depends on how stable the stones will be against each other. If they're liable to move around a bit, then I'll use 2-part. If it's pretty solid, then glue gun is definitely easier. I'll tell you that much. And if you want tips and tricks on how to use 2-part epoxy, I've got a video about that, and it's a lot shorter than this. So, not to worry if you think this is taking forever. Right. So, we got the black back wheels. I'll do one.
Or you could do a cold truck with a layer of chopped black clay at the top.
That's an idea. That is really good. I think, is coal black or dark grey?
Black.
I think it's yeah, I think you're right. It is mostly black.
It's almost black.
Yeah.
Fair Hedgehog says, nice idea to Arty Life. Arty Life says, my dad is a model railway fanatic, so I know about this stuff. Fair Hedgehog says, fairly black.
How do you...
Very fairly black.
How much of a model railway fanatic? Does he have like a whole model railway in the attic? Or does he go to places and look at other people's?
Arty Life says black, but with some shiny silvery bits sometimes.
Yeah, true. I know Rod Stewart has model railway that he spent a fortune on. And when those guys at the model railway fair somewhere in England got their whole display smashed up by I think it was only 2 drunk lads, Rod Stewart donated over $5,000 to help them rebuild, because he said he knows it's a life's work and a lot of money to get a setup so that it's good enough to be displayed the way they were. And he was not happy that two lads just decided that they're going to get drunk and ruin it all.
Party Hottie Life said used to, but then Yep did that too. Saw something about that recently.
Yeah. He's a nice guy. We had one of the... Which chef was it that's died today? Yeah, one of the celebrity chefs that I used to watch through my teen years. And it was very sad. They didn't say how, they just said he was.
Not Bloke James.
No.
Oh, Gary Rhodes.
Gary Rhodes. Which is... It's a shame. He was not an old guy. But, yeah. It was a surprise, because usually they have something about them being ill in the newspaper, but they didn't say what happened. Very big shame, but he did make a mark on this world. A lot of people know him.
Fair Hedgehog says that's sad.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yep, it is. So, we're almost there with these discs. If it wasn't going to be weight bearing, like the ones on these I didn't bother putting anything inside. So, let's get my hands, stop them being black. And I'm going to put a red disc and then a gold dot like I've done on these train wheels. Let's see, am I going to turn my red clay black?
Marty Life says he was working and suddenly took ill.
Oh, where did you read that? It's a shame. Kind of hope these people get a retirement before, because they work. There's something to be said about working so hard that you do not do much else. Life changes very, very quickly, and it happened to me. When I was 20, I was out clubbing twice a week. I had an amazing career. I was just working for the civil service doing human rights and devolution policy. But I woke up one day and I couldn't move. Couldn't even open my eyelids. I was on the sofa having a nap, and I can hear people walking past me and talking, and I couldn't move, and I couldn't nothing. It was terrifying. Turns out I got chronic fatigue syndrome. Did several years bedridden.
Apparently it was in one of the news articles.
Okay.
Marty Hottie Life said about that suddenly he was working when he took ill.
It's a shame. And before I got ill, there was so many things I was like, oh, I'd do that at some point when I got enough time. Didn't factor in the fact that there might come a point when I couldn't do it. Which is it's a shame when that happens.
Fair Hedgehog says it does sound terrifying.
There are worse illnesses out there. I count myself as lucky.
I think she might mean the
But
sudden death of...
which one terrifying? Waking up on a sofa paralysed, or suddenly dying while you're working? Both aren't great, to be honest.
No, I think both.
Right. So these red discs are going a lot thinner.
The sofa paralyzed.
Yeah. I mean, I look at other illnesses out there and I think I'm lucky. There's some truly horrible things you can get. Chronic fatigue syndrome, it does limit your life on what you can do because you're knackered all the time. So you'll find you're saying no to stuff. And apparently I can't make a circle today. Huh. Interesting. So when you make something that's completely rough, put it on your board and you've got much better chance of sliding it back into the shape you want using the grip. Trying to do it with your hands, you've got no chance. There we go, let's put this in the centre, smudge you out. Yeah, it was scary because I didn't know what was happening, but I see myself as entirely lucky I've not got something worse. There we go.
Artie Life says, it's a pretty good hexagon.
Thank you. Yeah, this is the modern art train. Everything's got a bit of cubism going on. Or a Minecraft train. That would work.
Yeah.
Probably gonna get told off for using the term Minecraft. There we go. So it seems like there's a latest controversy with YouTube is if YouTube deem your content to be aimed at children, they're going to demonetize anything. You can't have a monetized stream no more. Assuming you have it monetized in the first place. It was because they were doing targeted adverts through monetized streams, and then they realised they're not allowed to actually do that to children. It's illegal. They got fined a lot. So now a lot of YouTube people who are far bigger than I am and actually fulfill the rights for monetization are freaking out that maybe their stream might be counted or seen as a child friendly enough to be counted as a child stream. They're not being very clear on what they're counting as child aimed content. They're just putting out lots of warnings that if they decide that you're one of them and you haven't declared it, then they're going to fine you and all sorts of things like that. So yeah, it's dramatic, and luckily I'm just not big enough to be allowed to monetize any of all this. So it's a problem for way in the future, whether they will count my playing as aimed at children or not. I'm thinking not. I'm thinking that bar for whether they're going to deem content that the producer doesn't deem as child aimed at children, I think it's not. They're not going to chase that many people down, personally. But who knows? We'll see.
It's the FTC. They don't have the people to do it, but at the same time, the people they sued in the first place was YouTube, because it's YouTube's responsibility to make sure their users.
Right, I don't know if anyone can hear all this. Right, it's the FTC apparently that's put the ruling in place, and they've not got enough people to actually implement it very well. But they sued YouTube. What they find YouTube, and so if YouTube decides to write an algorithm, one of their nice training tool thingies that there's no humans involved, then it's going to get fun pretty quick. Right.
What they did instead was they just decided to say all the creators have to tell us if it's targeted at kids, which doesn't make any sense, because they should know the age of their users and just not target ads at kids if they know a user is underage.
I know.
You don't need to put everything on your creators.
We're trying to make sure that the wheels are level and are not buckling under themselves. And that's going to take some fiddling and finagling. But once you've got them where you want...
Do you bake it on its wheels, or do you bake
Yeah, I'm going to put the whole thing on the track and bake it all together. So, it's going to need to go as far up the front as possible. So about there. Yeah, it's going to be easier to put the last set of wheels on afterwards. So, making sure that they're... Whoop, you're not in line with the track. Come on the track, you. There we go. One wheel on the track. That's on the track. There we are. You're on. Sorry, I'm just having a wiggle. There we go. Right. Once you've finagled around a bit, this is what we're... The wheels aren't straight. Once I come off, I'm going to fiddle around and make it so that that all lines up pretty well. Then I'm either going to bake it and do a cart later, or I will leave it raw. Actually, I think I will bake it and do a raw cart and add that on afterwards. I think that's more sensible. But what I will do is I'm going to get some florist wire. I'm going to cut a little bit of florist wire and stick it at the back of the train, so when I add the cart it looks like it's got its join-in line, so it's not free floating. And I think that's going to be the easiest way to show that, because if you try and bridge it with raw clay, that's going to sag. So down towards the bottom at the centre, make sure you don't smudge any of your detail and push that in like that. Whoops. I'm going to need to use a pin tool. If you find that your armature's stopping you push your wire in, just use a pin tool, because the point will help you get through all that foil. Okay, so like that. There we go. So now I can push the cart onto the back of that, and it will look like a join, like the clasp that's between the main train and the cart. The other thing that you can also do is stick a bit of wire coming out of the chimney and build around it some smoke. So I'm going to show...
Oh, that was Jake.
Thank you, Jake. So I've got to straighten the wheels up. I will do that. What I'm going to do is I've got some florist wire. I'm just going to put a bend in it like that and push that into there like that. Can you see? Like this. Then get some wrought iron, kind of dark silver. And that's just the silver mixed with black. I'm going to make some little balls of different sizes, and you don't want them completely smooth. You want the join lines, because these are going to be the smoke. So some bigger, some smaller, some tiny, and we're going to build that around that wire. You can either thread them on like this.
Will it be too heavy for the wire?
Nope, it will not.
Oh.
You see? We're just going to build it up around the wire like this.
Hopefully you can show us an angle.
Yep, once I've stuck some of these big ones on, whoop, upright like that. Can you see? So that's the start of it, and then we're going to put some little ones in the gap. So some really small little bits like that, some tiny ones and that breaks up those solid lines, makes it look a little more interesting. Don't forget to turn it round, and it's a 3D model, so you've got to really get in and add them all over the place. Whoops, that's black. Pick up the grey. There we go. A few more on this. So we're really almost there with this, I think.
Party Hotel Life says, oh, that's so cute.
Let's put another.
I think it is too.
Thank you very much, Arty Hearty Life. There we go. And smudge those balls on because you don't want them falling off. So, can you see how the little balls just make it look far more like smoke? Yeah? So, once I've had a fiddle around and got those wheels so that they're straight. Yep, it's because I'm tilting it all over the place. Once I get it done, so we got sides, back, top, whoop, other side, and this is putting all the wheels out, but I will do it. I'm also, if I made this a bit longer, I could put a third wheel in, which is another option, which I might actually do. I might move this one a bit further forward. But you get the main point. I have finished a train. I hope it was helpful. And if any of you make trains in the future, do send me a picture. And if I can be of any help, just let me know. If you enjoyed my video, do like and follow me. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, on here obviously. I hope you all have a great week, and I'll see you soon. Alright,